And for more of what we can expect from the summit, Yongwook Ryu is Assistant Professor of International Politics at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. He joins us on the show this morning. Professor, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. I want to start, before we go to the Trump Yi meeting at the White House, I want to start with the meeting that President Yi had over the weekend with the Japanese Prime Minister. Some are suggesting that it's significant that President Yi chose to have a summit with Prime Minister Ishiba before he met Trump. So do you share this same view that it shows Lee is serious about improving ties and is placing greater emphasis on trilateral ties between Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington?
Yes. So as you mentioned, President Lee has chosen Japan to be his first foreign visit destination, the first Korean president to do so since diplomatic normalization with Japan in 1965. And this move went a long way to dissipate the Japanese concern that President Lee could be quite hardline towards Japan as a progressive Korean leader. I think what the Blue House was considering is to show its pragmatic diplomacy by choosing Japan as the first foreign visit destination, to show to the United States that he's serious about strengthening U.S.-Japan ROK Trilateral, at the same time giving a signal to the Chinese side that South Korea does not just prioritize United States over China. You know that the President Lee, at the same time he was visiting Japan, dispatched a special envoy to Beijing to meet with Chinese foreign minister to send that signal.
And looking ahead to the Trump-Yi summit, if you like, burden sharing is set to be high on the agenda, with President Trump wanting Seoul to pay more for U.S. troops in the country, while the South Korean government insists it will stick to previously agreed terms. So I want to know how you think this will all play out. I can't help but think that there could be a deal on the table. We've seen some of these deals before involving hundreds of billions of dollars of South Korean investments in the United States. Is that possible?
So I think President Lee's so-called pragmatic diplomacy could come under very severe strain when he meets Trump. The Tokyo summit with the Japanese Prime Minister went very well as it set the tone and direction of the bilateral relationship. But the real test for Lee's pragmatic diplomacy will come when he meets Trump. And there are a number of big items. One is to finalize the terms of the tariff agreement. So last month, South Korea and the USA agreed to a 15% tariff deal, but almost immediately when they announced the agreement, different interpretations came up, which mainly concern market access to agriculture and non-tariff trade barriers. Both sides are still disputing the exact terms of their trade agreement. Another item relates to security. And here there are two sub-issues. One is about increasing South Korea's defense budget. The U.S. is asking Seoul to increase its defense spending up to 5% of its GDP from the current 2.3%. But this is very difficult for President Lee to accept, especially given the sluggish South Korean economy and the government financial situation. However, the Korean government is willing to increase its share of the defense budget, so maybe there is some agreement to be made. The other specific issue relating to security is how to modernize and reorientate the U.S. ROK alliance. Here, the U.S. is pushing Seoul to do more for regional security, especially in promoting the U.S. strategic goal of containing China. Specifically, they are asking Seoul to include a mention of China in their joint communique or press statement, whereas the Lee government wants the alliance to focus more on peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula and to avoid any mention of China, because it might upset the Lee's strategic goal of taking a balanced approach between U.S. and China. Now, all this is very important, not just for South Korea, but for the region as a whole.
Well, you've talked about, where the two sides stand on various issues, but can we focus on game plan here, specifically the tactics that the United States will employ to pressure South Korea for steeper defense contributions? And you say President Lee is under quite a bit of challenge. So how is South Korea then preparing its negotiating position in this regard?
So basically, I think that what the U.S. is trying to do vis-a-vis its allies is to utilize the allies' military dependence on the United States to take advantage for the USA in trade and other areas. The South Korean government's approach to achieve successful negotiation outcome with the United States is to convince the USA that South Korea can help the USA to achieve some of its political and economic goals. So you know in your coverage you mentioned nuclear facilities where South Korea has significant capabilities to manufacture these nuclear plants. When it comes to shipping, the U.S. Manufacturing in the shipping area is pretty weak, and this is another area where South Korea can help the United States. So the Korean government approach is to tell the Americans that we are on your side, although we don't want to mention China specifically in any joint statement, but we can help you achieve your general strategic and economic goals. And that's going to be President Lee's approach when he meets Trump.
Professor, I want to ask you about North Korea and in particular President Lee's pragmatic approach that you've mentioned towards Pyongyang. Trump himself appears to favor engagement with Kim Jong-un as well. So could this lead to a strategic change in how the U.S. and South Korea deal with the North, particularly from a military standpoint?
Right. So if you remember, when Trump was president for the first time, we had a Trump, Kim Jong-un, and a progressive Korean president in South Korea. Now, when Trump became president again, we have the same combination of Trump, Kim Jong-un, and yet another progressive government in South Korea. So the general direction and policy preference of both Trump and South Korean leader is to engage with North Korea with the hope to entice North Korea to come to the international community to become a normal country. However, here, I think a prior condition has to be the resolution of Russia-Ukraine conflict. Now, as you know, in recent month and year, North Korea-Russia military partnership has developed to such an extent that unless we see a resolution in Ukraine, which will lead to some political improvement between US and North Korea, I don't anticipate any significant move to be made on the North Korean issue.
And Professor, there's China as well. There are discussions potentially extending the scope of U.S. forces in Korea towards countering China, including in the Taiwan Strait. So how should South Korea balance their alliance commitments with economic and diplomatic plans vis-a-vis Beijing?
You know, this is really going to be the one of the thorniest issues between the two countries. So under the previous conservative Yoon government, South Korea was happy to play along with the United States, and that's when the Trilateral, the U.S., Japan, South Korea Trilateral really took off. Now, President Lee is happy to develop the Trilateral. However, he doesn't want to take the U.S. ROK alliance beyond the Korean Peninsula and target China. However, the current Trump administration has a number of China hawks in its administration, and they are really putting pressure on Seoul to reorientate its strategic focus beyond the Korean Peninsula and play a role in the general U.S. strategic goal of containing China. And I don't know how they are going to come to an agreement between these two perspectives. I think the USA will put significant pressure on Seoul to do what USA wants Seoul to do.
Thank you for speaking with us. It's good to see you. Yongwook Ryu, who is Assistant Professor of International Politics at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy.